Good morning.
Good morning.
As we approach a very important decision by the Chicago Public Schools and the Board of Education on whether or not the system will once again close and turn around a number of neighborhood schools, there's been much debate about what is wrong with public education in our city. As educators, parents, and neighborhood leaders, we know what's wrong with Chicago Public Schools, we know what's right, and we know what works. We are here today to release our vision of what a world-class education should look like for every student, not just those from higher income brackets. Our report, The School Chicago's Children and Students Deserve, will quickly become the public policy mantra for all people truly interested in our city's public schools. It is a compilation of data, extensive research, and narrative on what Chicago needs to provide our students the best education we have to offer.
As teachers, we experience on a daily basis both the joy and frustration of being a teacher. Joy from our students and knowing the important role we play in their lives. Frustration because our students deserve so much more from their education. As a union, it's our responsibility to assert leadership on educational issues, to familiarize ourselves with the research and offer practical solutions. That is the goal of this report. One thing we know is that the policies of the past 20 years, both locally and nationally, have not solved the problem of inequities between the education received by Chicago public school students and their peers in wealthy suburban or private schools. One obvious reason is inequitable funding. Illinois is among the bottom 3 states when it comes to fairness in funding for education. Illinois school funding comes mostly through local property taxes. So communities with concentrated poverty receive fewer school funding dollars. Research from the Education Law Center shows that despite having the 5th largest state economy in the U.S., Illinois ranks 33rd in the country for percent of gross domestic product spent on public education. Furthermore, according to the Center for American Progress, in Illinois, African American and Latino students receive little more than 90% of the per pupil expenditure received by white students. The paper that you have today outlines solutions to these funding inequities, including asking corporations to pay their fair share for the education of those who may work in their companies or buy their products. It calls on the city to take back unallocated TIF funds and use the money for services, including the schools. It calls for the revamping of school funding structures to provide comparable funding for both high and low poverty districts. It can buy smaller class sizes. The groundbreaking 1999 Tennessee STAR project showed that randomly putting students into small classes of 13 to 17 instead of normal classes of 22 to 25 led not only to academic improvements during the time the students were in the small classes from kindergarten to 3rd grade, but also that those students had improved academic results throughout their school career, into high school and beyond. At the early childhood level, Chicago has the 12th highest average class size in Illinois. Professional organizations of social workers, school psychologists, counselors, and school nurses have carefully studied the necessary number of these professionals needed to properly serve students. CPS does not even come close to what is recommended. Our research found that in 2012, 58 years since Brown versus Board of Education was to end segregated schools, close to 70% of African American students in Chicago attend schools that are intensely segregated. Greater than 90% of students at the school are African American. There are many inequities associated with this.
That we stand strong with our children's teachers in the fight for a high-quality education for every child. Parents trust teachers more than politicians, mayors, former basketball players, education hobbyists, Tribune editorial writers, or wealthy philanthropists to know how to educate children. I want to take the opportunity to thank the Chicago Teachers Union for putting together such a well-researched report about the kind of education our children need to succeed, and to thank them for bringing attention to what we should all really be talking about.
One is that the report helps us to debunk misconceptions. There are a lot of messages that we hear about what's wrong with public schools and what are the solutions that will fix them. And sometimes these messages are quite contradictory. But often, the messages get repeated so often in the media, by our political leaders, by our educational leaders, even in our everyday conversations, that the messages become taken for granted. They become conventional wisdom. They become so commonsensical that everyone seems to accept that this is how we fix schools. Well, what does the research actually tell us? The research actually not only does not often back up the solutions being put forward, often the research tells us that the solutions being put forward can make the problem worse, right? And so one example is with narrowing the curriculum. Common sense tells us you're not good with reading, all right, let's really focus on basic reading skills and narrow the curriculum. But the research actually tells us that the most effective way to teach reading is to teach reading in context, is to actually make the curriculum richer, right?
I want to say, finally, an education plan instead of a business plan for Chicago Public Schools. The school Chicago students deserve is a comprehensive proposal to fundamentally improve public schools for all Chicago children. A proposal that is based on educational research, what we actually know about what makes quality, equitable schools. The Chicago Teacher Union proposal to strengthen public education in Chicago is a sharp alternative to the status quo. I also want to say that this policy proposal signals a new day for teachers' unions in this country. It represents a teachers' union, it comes out of a teachers' union, that not only defends the rights and working conditions of teachers, which it should, but it takes responsibility alongside parents to insist on equitable, just, holistic, world-class schools for all children.
I stand here today to speak to you on our excitement about this report. Over the past year, we've been meeting and partnering with Chicago Teachers Union to ensure the importance of parent participation in our children's education and collaborating to find solutions. We are so pleased with this report, and we are so glad to see that our issues are highlighted in this document that is taking a comprehensive look at students' education.
Points. I want to say thanks to CTU and other community partners who put this incredible report together. I think it's incredibly necessary. Also, I think it's a very clear representation that CTU does value community and parents and sees them as integral parts of children's education, right?
The CTU report correctly points out that high-stakes, standardized testing is a key component of the pedagogy of poverty. Indeed, the combination of city policies and the federal No Child Left Untested law is rapidly turning schools into little more than test prep programs. Such programs fail our children and leave them behind, particularly children of color, low-income children, English language learners, and students with disabilities.